What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's
start with our passenger car flagship, VAZ. It is no secret that VAZ is part of the Renault-Nissan alliance. Renault owns 67.61% of VAZ shares, so much of its policy depends on the behavior of Renault management. And the alliance has not worked out an unambiguous position yet. There is no great desire to leave our market, but it is a bit scary to stay. In addition, VAZ suffered from the lack of chips more than other domestic manufacturers. After all, its products are more complicated than much more domestic UAZ Bucanca. Today VAZ is looking not only for ways to somehow do without some components, but also for a way not to leave the huge, 40,800 people staff of the company without work. For this purpose, since April 4th, the plants in Togliatti and Ijevsk have suspended work, and their employees went on a unified corporate vacation, which is usually organized in summer. Let me remind you that in Ijevsk they produce Lada Vesta, in Togliatti, other VAZs, Renault Logan and Renault Sandero. Accordingly, these cars are not produced now. We are waiting for April 24th, the end of the corporate vacation. However, this does not mean that things are bad there at all. Despite the suspension of car production, those who are engaged in equipment maintenance and repair have not gone on vacation, which was customary before. And, of course, employees of the Avtovaz Engineering Center and financiers work tirelessly. The former are busy with new projects, the latter with the search for suppliers. By the end of the vacation, by April 25th, at least a minimum stock of components should be ready to resume the work of the plants. However, VAZ is counting not only on the appearance of parts, but also on the appearance of other conditions for the continuation of work. For example, transition to simpler modifications or refusal from the maximum amount of foreign components. To quote from the official press release, active work is underway to replace some critical imported components with alternative solutions. And in addition, the company is also preparing special versions of some Lada models which will be less affected by imported components. It is not officially known about which components we are talking about, but, according to preliminary data, they may include ABS and ESP systems as well as airbags. Simplifying cars is not a very pleasant step, but, unfortunately, a necessary one. We cannot do it alone. We have the Customs Union regulation on the safety of wheeled vehicles TRTS 018/2011, and it states that from 2016 our cars must have ABS, and from 2017, ESP. It is possible to remove them painlessly only from Granta and Niva, and for more complex cars it is easier to find components that are modestly called grey imports. In any case, the regulations of the Ministry of Industry and Trade on the safety of wheeled vehicles manufactured in a special period may allow the release of cars without ABS and ESP, which, by the way, were supplied by Bosch. And the sales of new cars without EOA GLONASS in our country were allowed until 2023. However, cars without ABS and ESP can be operated only in Russia, so we can forget about their export. Probably, we will see such simplified cars by summer. Meanwhile, we are waiting for the resumption of work of the plants in Togliatti and Ijevsk at the end of April. GAZ Group is the most positive Russian company. It refuses to comment on the situation, but its GAZ Raid Sport team has just recently successfully completed the second round of the Russian Rally Raid Championship, and the GAZ press service is happy with good news about successful road tests of its own GMP 800 automatic transmission, a new 6-speed hydro-mechanical automatic, which will be installed, for example, on PAZ Vector Next, LIAZ 4292 Cursor, GA Zorns Next and Sadco Next. Everything is good here, although, if you think about it, GAZ is also happy that the reduction of requirements of technical regulations can significantly ease the life of the plant. Among other things, and faster to obtain vehicle type approvals for those cars which had to replace some components. So, this issue is also quite acute there. At the same time, it should be noted that GAZ is not only a manufacturer of GA Zeals and GA Zorns, but also a major supplier of parts for other enterprises. This is very important because GAZ Group supplies parts and components of its own production to more than 100 other companies. Of course, GAZ is not able to completely cover the needs of its production with its own components either. No automaker can do that. However, at least GAZ's auto component plants are still operating normally. Let me remind you that we are talking about the Gorky automobile plant, the plant of stamps and molds, Nizhny Novgorod Motors, which produces gearboxes and transfer cases, and the Karnash auto unit plant. All in all, they produce more than 6,500 items of products, including more than 1,700 items of high-strength and grey cast iron castings. More than 1,200 items of forging blanks, forgings, more than 10,000 stamp-welded components and assemblies of automobiles, and more than 5,000 items of assemblies, parts and units. And yet, I repeat once again, GAZ will not do without foreign components either, although the company does not want to talk about any significant simplification of its cars yet. Probably we will see everything with our own eyes after the Ministry of Industry and Trade authorizes the production of something completely non-technological. On the one hand, UAZ is lucky. For private buyers, most of the plant's products are weekend vehicles, and for corporate fleets, vehicles that have no analogues. But, on the other hand, some of these vehicles are not so dormant as some people think of them due to stereotypical way of thinking. There are enough foreign components here too, for example, according to the data of the company itself by the company itself. For example, according to the company itself, the share of foreign components in the Patriot model is 30%. And these are critically important percentages. For example, the transfer case and gearbox are produced by the Korean company Dymos, although they are supplied from China, and the automatic 6L50 from Punch Power Glide comes from Europe. Add to that smaller units like the clutch, as well as the aforementioned electronics, and you get the answer to the question of how difficult a task the factory faces. Not surprisingly, the UAZ press service in response to the request of the ZR did not lie. UAZ fully supports the initiative to introduce simplified technical regulations in Russia. This will help to prevent stoppage of vehicle production during the implementation of the program of import substitution of components. The company expects to switch to a new component base from Russian suppliers as soon as possible, which will allow it to meet the current technical requirements again. The situation with KAMAZ is more interesting. It is clear that they are also very happy about the simplified technical regulations, but formerly KAMAZ, like GAZ and Ural, was allowed to produce simpler vehicles much earlier, a month ago. However, it was all about environmental standards, which are difficult to meet without foreign components. And we are not talking about -€4 or even -€3. Now they are talking about the transition to -€2, but unofficially so far. There is a feeling that Chelny is ready to do anything to save the new P6 engine of the Tibet project. If this is not done, they will have to return to production of the old KAMAZ 740 engine. And this is not good at all. Probably, to simplify the P6 engine by removing environmental systems, primarily urea, from it is the best thing that could be thought of. However, it is not limited to urea. There will most likely be a simpler power system with mechanical fuel injectors and many other design simplifications. As Daimler Truck slammed the door and left, KAMAZ was faced with the question of the prospects of producing K4 and K5 generation vehicles. Some feared that they would have to go back to the K3 cab. Yes, that's what they used to haul watermelons from the south, but KAMAZ's press service reassures, KAMAZ's final production facility, the automobile plant, continues production of K4 and K5 generation vehicles. In April and May the work on the production of vehicles of the new model range, despite all the difficulties, will continue. And what will happen next? Theoretically, the production of K4 was going to be finished this year anyway. It was rightly given up and they started to save K5, which is difficult to pull out without the participation of Daimler Truck. At the same time, the plant's press releases speak cautiously about the K4. The top management of the company is taking a number of measures to organize the supply of components for the K4 line so that the assembly of these market-demanding vehicles on the KAMAZ assembly line could be continued at least until the end of this year. At least that is, there is a possibility that the K4 will remain in service next year. I am not going to estimate this probability. Already now the plan for production of these vehicles is limited by the availability of components. Whether they will appear later is a question. And how much they are needed in principle if the transition to the K5 is being prepared is also a question. However, the press service is unambiguous about the K5, as noted by Sergei Kogogin, General Director of PJSC KAMAZ. KAMAZ's task is to start assembling K5 vehicles starting from January 2023 without the participation of foreign partners. The initial volume of trucks to be produced will be small, but the company does not plan to give up a promising line of vehicles, in the development of which it has invested a lot of money and time. At present, K5 is being worked on in two directions: localization of some components at its own subsidiaries and search for new suppliers. Of course, it would be a pity to lose this generation, in which KAMAZ employees have invested a great deal of money and labor. In conclusion, the challenges faced by the domestic car industry under sanctions highlight the resilience and adaptability of manufacturers. With the absence of critical safety features like airbags and anti-lock braking systems, as well as compliance with outdated Euro-2 emission standards, the industry is forced to innovate in ways that prioritize survival over modernity. While these conditions may seem daunting, they also present an opportunity for growth and transformation. As the industry navigates these obstacles, it will be crucial to focus on enhancing safety, sustainability, and technological advancement to secure a more competitive future. The road ahead may be tough, but it is also filled with potential for change and improvement.